very happy to welcome Hunter Scott. Hunter, thank you so much for coming and doing this.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. When you take on a new client at LaFamos, what is the approach you take from a strategic point of view?
I guess approach will have to change depending on your goals. First, we try to establish what essentially it is that you're trying to get to. Because there are many, many different aspects that can be done for an artist, publicity-wise and marketing-wise. So what you want to look for is essentially, for artists who have trouble with this, we tell them, try to even close your eyes and envision where you want to be in a couple of years from now. And we take that as the end point. Think about it as if you're trying to go through a maze. Only the best way of getting through that maze is actually starting from the end. You're going to hit less walls along the way. And then we try to make those goals measurable so we can quantify them and put them together into essentially a timeline so we're able to be accountable for our actions. Because if you say, I just want to be famous, that means absolutely nothing. Not to you, not to me. We don't have a way to quantify it. But even if you want to say, I want to sell 1 million records, the whole idea of looking at something that's essentially 2 years from now, and you're looking at something so big and so beyond your grasp, you don't even know how to get there. You actually want to go backwards and say, okay, if we can actually take that, that's what we call in real marketing terms, it's called a macro goal. If we can take that macro goal and break it up into actionable tasks, which then we can take derivatives of and make into essentially a to-do list, if you will, then that will tell you if you're starting from step number 1, taking out step number 2, and then 3 and 4 and 5, you actually know how you're going to reach that end goal. So strategy-wise, we would start with those goals, and then we would essentially see how we would put that together into a PR and branding strategy for the particular client. It could be a client that wants to do a Kickstarter campaign and raise money. It could be someone that wants to be established as a touring band and just want to tour as much as possible. Be someone who just wants to maybe get a management deal. But managers who work on 15 or 20%, you're going to approach them and they're going to say, but 15% of 0 is always going to be 0. So you have to prove that essentially there's demand for the product.
Okay. At LaFamos, what's the criteria that you have at your company for taking on a new musical artist?
It has to, essentially it has to be a really good product. It always starts with a product. And then we have to make sure it's essentially something that we would be comfortable with promoting. It's music that we love, that we feel comfortable with and we enjoy, because we do limit ourselves and we're very picky with the people that we work with. And it has to make sense in a sense of publicists have particular contacts. So if we work with the pop, indie, rock world, we will not take on hip hop band, for instance. Publicist is only good for, well, I don't want to say only good, but publicist is mainly good for their contacts. So essentially, if you hire a publicist, you want to get your press, but if my contacts are with particular bloggers who enjoy a particular type of music, you want to be very careful that you're not promising you're going to get them something in that level. Also, managing expectations is really important, which brings us back to that goals that we discussed, because we want to make sure it's something we can really do for them. So before we even begin a campaign, we'll ask for very specific goals. So if someone tells us, let's say it's a brand new band no one's ever heard of, because we work with some bands that no one's ever heard of, really just starting out, and some that have done amazing things. But for those who are starting out, if they want to say, we want to be in Rolling Stone magazine in 6 months, or we want to do a campaign and raise $30,000 in a couple months, when there's no fan base, there's no demand for that kind of stuff, or when you're looking at particular magazines where there's so much competition and they're interested in already featuring more established acts, then we can save us the trouble and say, this is not going to be what we can do. You can really manage expectations well and make sure people are happy.
It's interesting you bring that up, because I remember, in the world we live in today, so one of the things about expectations is, and I look at it from the point of view of, understanding media, is that piece that Rolling Stone did, where they did that contest to put a band on their cover. This is Rolling Stone. This is 2.5 or 2.8 million subscribers. And the band who won, it literally did nothing for their career. And I don't know if that was an expectation, but often I think the point being is that when you talk about managing expectations, even when sometimes crazy expectations are met, nothing happens.
Yeah, it has to be. I really don't believe there's such thing as overnight success. You have to build that relationship with the fans, and you have to work your way up in certain things. And that has to make sense in terms of you're not just looking at someone who just spilled all money into something. Very similar to an ad. You can do, and even just a couple months ago, there was a huge ad campaign for an artist. I won't mention them here, but huge billboard campaigns all over Hollywood. And we're talking about advertisements, and it was Billboard, taken out in Billboard magazine, and so on and so on and so on. And I still haven't, not only I can't even tell you their music, but I don't even see them in a particular way. I don't think they are where they would want it to be, having done that campaign. So essentially, even that, when you have a lot of funding to do a big ad campaign, and essentially you would get yourself in a cover of magazines and all that stuff through advertisements or commercials and so on and so on and so on, that's not particularly going to get you to where you want to go.
Exactly. It's almost like today it has to be more organic.
Well, the beautiful part, exactly, because the beautiful part about music is that it still cannot be really bought. If you look at people like Heidi Montag or Paris Hilton, it's still the one area that's very, very hard to purchase your way into.
Very true. Very true. I want to talk to you about something that you said. You talked about the fact, I mean, in the world today that we're in, you know, there's so much, I guess, re-examination and reconfiguring of the artist-fan relationship and the artist development process. And I think you once said an interesting thing. You said, you know, today there's so much more creative freedom, but there is also far more work than any one artist can do. Can you expand on that?
Yeah. Essentially, when you are not going with a major label, or not even an indie label, you have creative control because you become the CEO and the president of your brand. But it also means that you also have a lot more responsibility. So you have to understand what everybody's role is, what the manager is supposed to do for you, what the publicist is supposed to do for you, what the booking agent is supposed to do for you, and so on and so on and so on. You become that. How can you supervise your employees if you don't know what they're supposed to do and be accountable for what they're doing on your behalf? Yeah, so on the second level, you have what we call the DIY movement, the do-it-yourself movement. Everybody's saying we're going to do it ourselves. But I think people took it a little bit out of context. What it really meant is you don't necessarily need a big label. The label more becomes the investment, because they have a PR department, they have a press department, they have a marketing department, they have all these things that, and obviously they'll put you in a studio and pay for the producer and so on and so on and so on. But if you have the means of doing that yourself, that's what that means. You can create that team, but it doesn't mean you as one person can do it. You can't wear too many hats. You shouldn't. I can't play and write music and sing like any of my clients. You know, I play some guitar, I can write some songs, I've done it as a hobby. Can I do it like my clients? I can't. They are the professionals doing it, but they can't handle the marketing and the publicity strategies that we do because it's not what they do in the day-to-day. So I'm a strong believer in letting everybody do what they do best. Booking agent will book you gigs. Your manager will manage your career. Your publicist will handle press on your behalf. So it really just, you have to find that team of people who are going to be part of it, but you also have to be responsible for exactly what they're doing.